In a debate like this, the UK's future in Europe, how significant an influence would these publications still have? Paul, let's start with you.
Well, I think actually that when it comes to Britain's press, you're right, we read more newspapers than many other countries in the world. We're obsessive newspaper readers. You'll see people on the tube reading the free newspaper, you'll see people buying one every day, and obviously online, people read newspapers like the Huffington Post. So there's a great thirst for journalism in Britain, and I have to say that British press reflect the sort of debate that's going on within Britain right now, which is all about Europe. Do we want to stay or do we want to go? And many of the newspapers you'll have seen just there are very much in favour of Britain pulling out of the European Union. For years they reflect this debate in the Conservative Party that actually Britain would be better off out because we're sick of going down a route towards an ever federal, a more closer union within Europe. The fact that maybe Europe wants to be a United States of Europe, like the United States of America, and a lot of people in Britain don't like that. However, when push comes to shove, Number 10 Downing Street are pretty sure that a lot of these newspapers, including the tabloids, may well back off that final decision of pulling out. In other words, they'll flirt with the idea of Brexit. They like the idea of keeping up pressure on Brussels, but when push comes to shove, maybe we're better off in.
So, Douglas, you just heard Paul there. The papers, the tabloids are all pushing this idea of getting out. What do you think? Do you think it'll have a major influence?
Well, I mean, much like American politics, we're used in Britain to very big issues about our nation's future being reduced to rivalries, individual dynasties, and so on. And that's what's happening in the last 48 hours with the so-called Brexit campaign. It's true what Paul says to a certain extent. I mean, a lot of the media here are very sceptical about the EU and always have been. That's because so many of their readers are very sceptical about the EU and always have been. But the important thing, in a way, is not to overstate the role of the media in this, because the campaign, the campaign to keep Britain within the EU, which the Prime Minister is obviously part of, and almost the entire Labour Party, the opposition, among others, are part of, is in most ways the one that is currently going to outgun the Out campaign. I say that because there's a massive campaign already underway from the city, from financial services, from a whole establishment to terrify the British people into voting to stay in the European Union, terrifying them into thinking that if they leave, all four horsemen of the apocalypse will immediately descend on the UK. So the British press is, to a great extent, just speaking back to that great project fear.
Douglas, I want to push further on that. You know, the Daily Express, that is a paper that's had a firm position on Europe for many years. They've been running what they call a crusade to get out of Europe. Do you expect other newspapers to, in effect, take a side on this issue, and where are they likely to come down?
Well, the Express is not surprising. It's running a sort of crusade. It has always had at the top right-hand corner of the front page a crusader on it. So that's the sort of thing the Daily Express would do. I'd expect, as Paul says, that a lot of them will flirt effectively with exit until the last minute. There will be some who will urge their readers to vote to get out of the European Union. Others will, I suspect, by that point, after a pretty bruising campaign, take a sort of moderate middle ground, and they will say that it would be the moderate middle ground choice to remain in the EU. But that itself is not a certainty, because although David Cameron and the Project Fear and the Remain lobby are trying to persuade the British people that exit from the European Union would be a leap into the dark and into the unknown, actually remaining in the EU at this stage, after seeing all of the recent crashes that the EU has gone through, may itself be deemed by the British people to be a far greater leap in the dark. In other words, that Remain may be more dangerous for us than exit.
Interesting. Paul, I want to pose this question to you, given that you are with the Huffington Post UK. Has the power to form opinion, has it moved away from traditional newspapers in recent years? Has it moved more toward online discourse? Or does that now play out in social media? What do you think?
Well, newspapers have caught up. There used to be dinosaurs when it came to new media and online. Lots of British newspapers have rapidly learned that they've got to be on Facebook, they've got to be on Twitter. I was one of the first journalists in the House of Commons lobby to be on Twitter. At the time, people said, what on earth are you doing that for? That was back in 2009. Now everybody's on it. The big difference here is that this is not just a story about politics or economics. It does involve personalities. It does involve trusting people you know to be on the same side. That's why Boris matters in this race. You open the segment with Boris. He's called the politician, the kind of Heineken politician here. He refreshes the parts that other politicians can't reach in Britain. He's got a popular appeal on the street with plumbers, with plasterers, with van drivers, unlike many politicians here. And that's why David Cameron was so worried about him making that decision last night. And so it's not just the newspapers and the media, it's people like Boris who could help sway this debate. There's one poll last week that showed Boris could add 15 points to the Out campaign. That's some...
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.